Good morning, y'all. Welcome in to another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends over at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your next order. First show that we've had since the holiday weekend. Hope everybody had a nice time. You know, no matter what you did, whether you're a big 4th of July person or you just maybe got to enjoy a quiet day off off of work or something like that. I hope everybody stayed safe, had fun, all of that stuff. We've got a lot to dive into. It's been a chaotic couple of days. I'm thankful for it. The content gods have blessed us with some discussion points for today's show. It's that time of year where it gets a little bit quiet. Fortunately, we've got media days coming up next week. We've got some fun content projects coming out as a company. I'm not really sure what I'm able to say in terms of specifics on that, but I will have a Monday night show next week, so just be ready for that. I will kind of go into the history books a little bit and talk about what could have been with some certain situations in CSU history. So again, keep an eye out on all of that. Today we are going to get into quite a bit. I'm going to talk about the New York Times recent article, which listed the top 100 rivalries in college football, according to them. I agree with the top 10. I think a lot of it they got right, but I was surprised how much they snubbed the Rocky Mountain Showdown and the Border War, just based on some of the Power Four rivalries that they ended up putting ahead of it. Based on this rankings, you would assume that every single matchup within the SEC and Big Ten is a rivalry. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm ignorant to that. I'd be surprising to me given how obsessed I am with college football, but we'll give some thoughts on all that. I will talk about what the biggest rivals in the Pac-12 might be, who CSU might, have some beef with. I've talked before about, I think that CSU and Utah State should introduce a traveling trophy in the Pac-12 era. I think it makes a lot of sense. CSU, you're losing that annual game with Air Force. Those two programs have a lot of established history already geographically. There's a lot of things in place. But most importantly, just organically, from a competitive standpoint, it's turned into an intriguing game. And I think that's the most important factor in a rivalry, is that it develops organically. You can try and shoehorn them as conferences. You can try and force them, like the old Pac-12 kind of tried to force Utah and CU into a rivalry. They branded it the Rumble and the Rockies or whatever. It just never really played out that way. For one thing, the games weren't all that competitive. Utah dominated it. Also, there just wasn't any history there. It was forced, and it didn't work out because of it. CSU and Utah have far more history than CU and Utah ever did, and you could just feel that. It was weird. It didn't work out, but I do think there is something potentially brewing here with CSU and Utah State. If we have time at the end, we'll get into some college football rankings, talk about some guys on the team who were maybe snubbed a little bit, who maybe will have a chance to get a bump here when they do the ratings adjustments down the line. But at the beginning here, I wanted to talk about Grand Canyon's induction into the Mountain West a year early. They were in this weird spot where they weren't going to have a conference for the upcoming school year, so I don't think that this is shocking by any means. There are workarounds you could have done. Basically operate as an independent for a year, schedule a bunch of random teams. It's really challenging to do. Obviously, Oregon State and Washington State had some struggles filling their own schedules with sports. That's why those two teams are going to play a home and home this year in football, which isn't unprecedented, but it speaks to the challenges of trying to fill out a schedule when you don't have a conference affiliation, knowing that they were going to join, or they were scheduled, I should say, to join the Mountain West in 2026 and beyond. 2026-2027 school year, when the departing Mountain West schools for the Pac-12 were leaving. GCU, one of the additions they added. But this isn't surprising, just based on that. You already have an opportunity, if you're the Mountain West, to help out somebody who's going to be a member institution for you. It's kind of like CSU changing some things on the schedule this year to host Washington State. They needed opponents. You're going to be league mates here in a year. We'll throw you a lifeline and we'll make this work. That's essentially what the Mountain West is doing here. Throwing a lifeline to a future member who was in a really weird spot at the moment. From that standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of drama involved with this. Unsurprisingly, the drama never ends between the Mountain West and the Pac-12. Billable hours out the wazoo here for the lawyers. Nobody's been a bigger winner in all of this conference realignment mess than various law firms and search firms and PR and all that over the last couple of years. It's just been crazy how all of this has played out. I actually have a statement because I was curious. I reached out to CSU just wondering what their thoughts on the early edition of GCU were. I don't think this is a move that schools like San Diego State, CSU, Boise supported. This is a statement. It was not from CSU directly. They referred me to the PR firm that's representing CSU and Boise State and Utah State in their current lawsuit against the Mountain West. It's from the O'Melveny partner and litigation department. Steve Olson is who is responsible for the statement, but it says, the Mountain West Conference's edition of Grand Canyon University as a member for the 2025-2026 academic year significantly and negatively impacts the schedules, opportunities, and budgets of the departing universities. The Mountain West actions are also contrary to express representations the Mountain West and its commissioner made to the departing universities, and being members of the Mountain West through June 30th, 2026, the departing universities were not consulted or permitted to vote on the early invitation to GCU. We will address this matter and the harm to the departing universities in the litigation. Basically, this just throws another wrinkle into the current mediation process between the two leagues regarding those poaching penalties and the exit fees for the Mountain West and the Pac-12. There's all kinds of layers to that. I mean, the Pac-12 I've read is, throwing that the Mountain West basically took advantage of them and added all these unnecessary fees. And honestly, I've talked about this before, but part of what resulted in the inevitable split and why a full reverse merger isn't going to happen was that I think Gloria Navarez, the Mountain West commissioner, sensed that Oregon State and Washington State had an intent to rebuild the Pac-12, which went in line with everything that I had heard behind the scenes for years. If you've listened to this show the last couple of years, I said that I didn't think they were going to do a full reverse merger. As somebody who's always been in the Mountain West, I could have gotten behind something like that. But I'm not surprised for optical reasons why it didn't play out that way, and political reasons in the end. But Gloria tried to really charge Oregon State and Washington State crazy fees to continue that scheduling agreement that they had in place for this past year. And I don't think it was the wrong move necessarily, but I do think that it really put gas on this fire here and really kind of sparked the Oregon State and Washington State plan into motion, which was fine. We'll just take your biggest assets as a conference. There's a lot that's going on behind the scenes here. But if you're going back to that statement, obviously CSU, Boise State, Utah State, the departing schools, the people that are involved in the lawsuit, they feel like they were duped in all this. They feel like they were told GCU wouldn't get added early. The schools that are sticking around in the Mountain West, Nevada, UNLV, Air Force, they all colluded together behind the scenes to wait until the Pac-12 schools had it officially given notice that they were leaving, which meant then that they in turn lost their voting privileges within the Mountain West. I think there's probably some validity to both sides. I do think that this was probably a cheeky move, if you will, by the remaining Mountain West members. I don't think they, frankly, give a damn what the departing members think, and I think there's some fairness to that. I think if you look at it from an objective standpoint, these schools are in a bad spot, much like what we've argued with why this gamble to rebuild the Pac-12 makes sense. You're betting on yourself during an untimely situation. There's a lot out of your control, so you're making the best of a bad situation. That's basically what I've argued. The Mountain West essentially is doing no different here. I get why, if you're CSU, if you're Boise State, if you're Utah State, why you would do this, because it's potentially just more leverage to drive down those, exit fees and the poaching penalties and everything that you're currently in court trying to come to a resolution over. But I don't know. I'm not going to get on my soapbox and make it seem like it's this whole horrific thing the league did, because they're looking out for their own interest. And it's a school that, as an institution, raises some questions. It's like a for-profit type university. Don't love the optics of being associated with that, but from a competitive standpoint, athletically, GCU is very good at basketball, at soccer, softball, a lot of different things. And so it is a boost to your conference in that sense. It'll be a weird little one-off year we'll look back on in 5 years and say, remember that time CSU and GCU were in the same conference. You could argue that the Mountain West didn't necessarily need another challenging opponent. I mean, the league's already pretty tough as is this year. But again, if you're the Mountain West, much like what I've argued with the Pac-12 rebuilding their league for 2026, it's not just about the right now. It's about what's best for us in the long run. And obviously, GCU, especially given what you've lost, if you're the Mountain West, adding them to the league is a better situation for you. Now, it does create some logistical hurdles, which is the biggest reason I'm surprised it happens at this point. You already have released the soccer and the volleyball schedules. There are down payments that have been, put down for travel and stuff. Like, this is going to be a headache. It's going to cost money. So there's some validity to the departing schools having some beef with it, and you'll sort that all out in court. But in terms of the chess moves back and forth that are going on between these two conferences and how this is all playing out, I do understand where the Mountain West is coming from. This is a nice, valuable addition for your league from a competitive standpoint. Again, institution-wise, that's up for debate. I'm not going to get into the nuance of all of that, but I mean, it's a great market in Phoenix. Like, there's a lot to like about GCU. I would have been on board with GCU being a Pac-12 non-football member, maybe not at a full share like Gonzaga, but I mean, I think they have a lot of the same arguments you would make for a school like St. Mary's, other than St. Mary's is a better school academically, a little bit more of an established track record. But I mean, the Phoenix market, I think if you were doing this from a business standpoint, is one that makes a lot of sense if you're trying to be leagues that have a Western based league, or a footprint. You know what I mean? Aaron says in the Toyota chat, the hat looks sharp. Go White Sox. As a White Sox fan, I'm hoping the Rockies break the least wins in a season record. I am rocking a White Sox hat. If you are listening on the audio only side later on, I am a Rockies fan, but I have a camaraderie with the worst teams in the league. I rep them all. I've got a Royals hat. I've got a Mariners hat. Twins. Like, if you're a miserable baseball team, I'm right there with you. If you're listening live on YouTube this morning and you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. It will be interesting to see how this all plays out in court. Like, I do think the Pac-12 will try and use this to their advantage, and they should. I think the Mountain West is doing the best for them in this tough instance, and I understand that as well. It's all just politics. Everybody's trying to do what is in their eyes going to give their league the most stability down the line. I do imagine from a basketball standpoint, which for this show, that's the most relevant impact, I imagine it goes back to an unbalanced schedule. I think you're still going to play a 20-game conference schedule, but now it'll go back to you play two different opponents only once a season would be my guess. We'll see how that all plays out. It will be interesting to see who gets the benefit in that unbalanced schedule. Traditionally, the program based in San Diego, I do think, got some sweetheart treatment on the scheduling side. They've been able to avoid that trip to Laramie quite a few times over the years. They basically almost always only have to go to one of Laramie or the Springs. They usually do come to Fort Collins, but I do think that it wouldn't be surprising if some of those little scheduling quirks end up benefiting the UNLVs of the world, the Nevadas of the world. I mean, if you're the Mountain West at this point, what do you really have to lose? It's all fair game. There's no love lost in war, as they say. I didn't get that saying right, but you know what I mean. But that's kind of where I'm at with all this. I think you could make a big hot take if you want. I did hear somebody say, like, this is a little bit of an indictment of how the Mountain West views their Olympic sports, that they're willing to like put all of these programs in a whirlwind here with this situation. That's maybe a little bit dramatic, but I do think there's some validity to it, and that's kind of how this whole process is going to go. I think, it's not black and white, it's gray, like most things in the world. And at the end of the day, all of these schools and both of these leagues are just doing what they think is going to give them the best opportunity to get the most TV dollars, to generate the most interest, to remain relevant in this ever changing landscape of college athletics. We're going to keep the fun rolling. We do need to take a quick break real quick. Shout out a couple of our partners. If you got any questions, comments, throw them in the Toyota chat. I'll get to as many as I can. If I don't get to it right away, we'll come back around. By the way, last show I said that and then I totally spaced it. I had like 5 or 6 questions starred, ended up rambling about whatever it was, like, it was about the standings of the different conferences and the terminology of P5 versus G5 and why it's kind of lost all its meaning. But I wanted to say my bad to those of you in Ram Nation that were sticking around waiting for your questions to be answered. We'll be better about that in the future. But again, let's take a quick break real quick, and then we'll keep this party rolling. Cake Mortgage is the business owner's home mortgage partner. What they do is specialize in non-QM loans. Some of the problems that they help solve. If you are an employee of a regular company, you get a W-2. It's a really simple process in terms of proving your income. If you go to get, a home loan, if you go to refinance a business loan, something like that, it's all real simple. It's a bit more complicated if you're a business owner. By maximizing legitimate business deductions and expenses, business owners can reduce their taxable income and keep more money in the business. This means that their tax returns show little income. Most lenders don't understand this type of complex income, so they get denied for home loans and refinancing. K can get business owners approved by validating your cash flow through bank statements, through certified profit and loss statements, or business tax returns. This is good for creative professionals, tech entrepreneurs, business founders, freelancers, anybody who's trying to be their own boss. This is a good process to be a part of. Cake Mortgage Corporation. Oh, I should say, if you're looking for more information on this, please check the link in the description to get started. Again, Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lender, NMLS number 1734623, licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions to apply. Just like your favorite team needs a home field advantage, your home needs a home floor advantage, and Empire Today can help you get it. Empire Today has flooring experts, dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. We've all been to those, big box stores. It can be a little bit overwhelming. I'm a recent home owner, about 6 months ago. It's already been a process with the furnace and the AC and everything else. But I've been to Home Depot approximately 35 times in the last 6 months. And when you're in one of those spots where you don't really know what you're looking for, you're just hoping that the people there are going to know what they're talking about, because these are big, expensive purchases. You're going out on a limb here. When you work with Empire Today, the people that you are going to be involved with, they live and breathe flooring. This isn't some 17-year-old clocking in for a shift who was in flooring this week, but he's going to be, at the refrigerators next week. It's not like that. The person you're working with is going to be an expert in their field. Schedule a free in-home estimate today, because some things are just better at home. DNVR listeners can get a $350 discount when you use the promo code DNVR. Yes, you heard that right. A $350 discount with the code DNVR. Restrictions to apply. Visit EmpireToday/DNVR for full details. All right, Carrie in the Toyota chat says, when do you think the Pac-12 and Mountain West mediation is done? Honest to God, I have absolutely no idea. I've asked people in the law field much smarter than me, obviously. To them, they're a little bit surprised that this process has already gone on as long as it has. Usually mediation, from my understanding, and I'm not a law expert, newspaper guy, communications, degree, like I'm not that smart is the point I'm trying to make here. But my interpretation is that mediation typically expedites this process, and it's just drug out. And now you throw the GCU wrinkle in the mix of this. I mean, maybe that adds who knows, days, weeks, whatever it might be. I think there'll be some type of resolution before the season starts. I just think that both of these leagues would be better suited to get this past them, especially the Mountain West, who's going to need to establish a new media deal in 2026 and beyond, and they're kind of waiting for the Pac-12's media deals to shake out. Obviously, the Pac-12 has announced CBS as their primary partner, but who's going to be the secondary and third partners? Really, they can't. If you're the Mountain West, you kind of got to wait until the Pac-12 finishes it out, and then you try to make the best of whatever is left. Maybe it's Fox, maybe it's ESPN. Who knows? We shall see. But I do think we're getting to the point where it's got to be sooner rather than later, just because there's a real incentive for all of these schools to get this all sorted out. And the tough part is like the dominoes that need to fall are all connected to each other in some way. Like that's not the best metaphor for all of this, but I just mean that like if you're the Mountain West, you're waiting on the Pac-12 to shake out their media deal. If you're the Pac-12, though, uh, your media deal is somewhat contingent on who your members will be, and that isn't all going to be sorted out until you finish the mediation and you establish exactly how much it's going to cost all of these departing schools for this to work out. So there's so many little fine details that they have to figure out, and then once they get one or two of these knocked down, it's all going to get going, and I think we're really going to see a lot of resolution fairly quickly. But as Carrie says, I want the best outcome for the Pac, but also, geez, just break up already. It's going to be a really weird dynamic. I'm not going to lie. I'm really interested to see what the vibes are like at Mountain West Media Days next week. I'm curious to see how transparent, particularly the schools that are sticking around, are going to be. Is it going to be a situation where everybody's encouraged to play nice, not say anything dumb that potentially goes viral and generates headlines from people like me? Or will they tell us how they really feel? Will UNLV pound its chest? Will Nevada and Air Force, talk about how they're just glad to be aligned with the universities that showed loyalty? Like, it is just going to be interesting to see from a messaging standpoint how all of this works out. My guess is there won't be anything crazy. Like, I do think most of these coaches will have been told from their admin to not step in it, don't put your foot in your mouth here, and then potentially create a bigger circus for us. But you never know. You never know. I'll never forget basically when this current version of conference realignment, when this current cycle began 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, when Texas and Oklahoma announced that they would be going to the SEC. I was talking to Carson Strong. That was actually the first time I interviewed Jay Norvell, and I remember thinking, man, what a cool guy. Fast forward like a year later, it's funny how that all played out, but I remember asking Carson Strong just what his thoughts on those moves were, and he made comments that, at the time Texas wasn't what they are right now. He's like, Texas and OU, like, they sometimes struggle to even win the Big 12. Like, what are they going to do in the SEC? Just thought it was a hilarious quote. It's just going to be interesting to see how nice all of these schools end up playing with each other. CD6 in the Toyota chat says there's supposed to be a deadline on the 15th for mediation, but that can always be extended. So who knows? That is great information. I appreciate you passing that along. I too would love a media days reality show like Love Island, but it's the Mountain West edition, and we get to see all these coaches behind the scene and all that. It would have been really fun a couple years ago, like when there was still some legit beef between Ken Wilson and Jay Norvell. Like, those coaches did not like each other. I would have killed to have a video feed of the awkward chit chat that would have happened. They always do like a coaches dinner, and there's meetings, between the ADs and the coaches and the heads of the league, and everybody getting on the same page and stuff. But from what I've heard, there's occasionally some conversations about personal things that have to get sorted out at these types of events. And while they're not going to go out and say it in the press and get it on record or anything like that, I do wonder how often does a coach be like, hey man, it's pretty much BS how you ran it up on us, or that was a penalty. Like, I don't know, just fun stuff like that. I will be out at Media Days, though, in Las Vegas next week, Tuesday through Thursday. I believe I'll be going live from Vegas on Wednesday. TBD on some of this time, so we'll get that info out to you as soon as we can. I'll have written content. We'll see what happens. Last couple of years, it's been a lot of talk about tampering and NIL and people going after Tory and Braden. I'll be interested to see what the narratives are this year, and what are the national reporters going to ask Jay about if they can't ask him about Dion and CU, because they find a way to ask 35 questions about it, no matter what the current conversation is or what the subjects are. They're going to be scratching their heads. They're going to be desperate for content. If you missed it, 104.3 The Fan is now the official radio affiliate for CSU football in the metro area. They'll broadcast every football game in 2025. There will also be pre and post game analysis. Not sure if that means from 104.3 hosts specifically, or if it just means they're going to air, the pre and post game stuff that you hear from Roth and Kevin McGlue and everybody that are already involved with that broadcast. Nothing about the broadcast team is going to change. Roth's still going to be play-by-play. Ricky Brewer's still going to be his color analyst. All of that stuff that you guys are used to. I just wanted to add that because when this was announced, I saw a lot of snarky commentary from CSU fans, and honestly, I get it. I too have had my own beef is too strong. I've had instances where I've clashed with folks over at that radio station just based on the way that they've been dismissive of CSU over the years. I was really sensitive about it when I used to work for the football team. Now that I've been on the media side for a decade now, it doesn't faze me quite as much. But 104.3 historically, and a lot of the people that have worked there, both in the past and presently, have always been pretty dismissive of CSU. I don't think it's a station that has earned much good faith with the fan base, with their commentary, with their coverage of CSU. Going back to the NCAA tournament, like I got into a little minor thing with Zach Bai of 104.3, who I actually really like and respect, and we squashed it, which is a good thing. He heard me out. I explained, where we were coming from. He explained to me where he was coming from, and we did squash that. So I'm not trying to make it seem like it was some big thing. I enjoy his basketball coverage. I think he's one of the better guys that they have over there. My point is that if you are a CSU fan who historically has not been stoked about the coverage that 104.3 has provided when it comes to CSU, I think that's fair. I don't think that's me coming on here and being hyperbolic or anything like that. I could say that to anybody's face and would feel completely in the right in doing so. Like, I'm not trying to be fake, make this some silly media beef or anything like that. Because honest to God, I think this is a really good thing for CSU fans. Outside of Northern Colorado, it has been a nightmare of a process trying to listen to these broadcasts on the radio over the years. I will never forget coming back from the 2017 New Mexico Bowl. I'm driving from Albuquerque, dropped off my colleague somewhere around the Springs, from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, trying to listen to a CSU. I think they were playing New Mexico even basketball game. I had to change the dial. I think it was 7 or 8 different times, just trying to keep up with the feed. There were stretches where it wouldn't come in at all. It was a really frustrating, really small time type radio deal. And the old administration, I was pretty publicly critical of it. They tried to tell me that wasn't the case. I remember that, like Joe Parker basically tweeting at me and being like, "No, you didn't." I'm like, "Yeah, the fuck I didn't. I just drove, 300 miles and went through this horrible process. This cannot be what it is." You can listen to a game on KOA across multiple states. I remember coming back from a CSU Utah State game where I listened to one of those crazy CU Arizona games where, God, who was that Arizona kid that just went wild on CU for like 2 years? But I listened to it from Logan all the way across, Wyoming on I-80 into Fort Collins, almost zero interruptions. So the fact that in the 21st century, even post 2013, like when I was in school, that you still couldn't listen to CSU football and basketball broadcast consistently in the metro area, which is, we're talking like a 70-mile difference here. This isn't the difference between, being on one side of the state or not. I just think this is going to be really, really good for CSU to have more accessibility. Nothing about the broadcast changes. You still get Brian Roth, who does a great job on the radio broadcasts. Now it's just going to be an easier process to be able to, listen to the games. You're not going to have to be changing the dial multiple times. The signal's going to come in stronger. 1043 is the biggest sports radio station in the state. All of this is a win for CSU, being more accessible, easier to watch. There's never a downside to that. And frankly, maybe this relationship ends up, resulting with some of the folks over at 1043 being more open to CSU coverage. I already saw Richie Carney had, John Weber on a podcast, radio show, whatever it was. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I love that. I mean, that's more than CSU's been featured on that station at any point in like the last 10 years. So I think it's good for the future of the program. It's, I think a relationship that can be mutually beneficial. If you're 1043, you don't have the CU broadcast because they're on 850 KOA. And this is it's a way for you to be more relevant in the college football space, instead of doing Air Force games, who I have a lot of respect for. But I've talked a lot about the weird dynamic with Air Force is that while it's a program that's been the most successful, frankly, of all the Colorado schools in my lifetime, and they've dominated both CSU and CU and in head-to-head matchups, it's just a weird deal that because so many of their students are not locally based, they're not going to stick around in the Springs after the fact, so they just don't have that same local base. And like even DU is kind of similar. Like you get a lot of rich kids from around the country, but they're not all necessarily staying in Denver. Some of them probably are, but there are just weird dynamics with all of that. But that's kind of my 2 cents on it all. I think it's a big win for CSU. I'm excited about the possibility of, having better exposure, especially in the Pac-12 era. If this goes well this year, I imagine this will be a deal that gets extended after the fact. But yeah, all good for CSU, and who knows, maybe this will kind of start a bridge between CSU and 1043. And if anybody at that station is looking for anybody that wants to talk CSU, hit me up on the old twitter.com, and then we'll see what we can do to get me on one of your shows to talk a little Rammies. All right, we got to take one more quick break. We got to shout out a couple of our partners, and then we are going to get into the rivalry debate. We're going to talk about that New York Times ranking of the top 100 rivalries in college football, why I think the Showdown and the Border War were both disrespected a little bit. Obviously, I'm biased, but it'll be a fun conversation. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Keep rocking with us. We'll keep this party rolling. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for some gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered. They've got the best custom headwear. You can start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. I know we're going to get a bunch of custom apparel through them at DNVR, which is really cool. They've got an awesome collegiate line. Their CSU hats are really, really cool. Looking forward to rocking those throughout the fall. They do have a partnership with CSU as part of their campus collection. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. If you're looking for banking that plays at your pace, whether you're tailgating, grabbing halftime snacks, or catching the game from the couch, First Bank is in your corner with their secure, easy-to-use mobile banking app. You can check your balance, split the tab for stadium nachos, stay on top of your money anytime, anywhere. It's like having a financial MVP right in your pocket. Here's the play that pays. You could earn $300 when you open a First Bank checking account. Use it to score tickets to the Nuggets, to the Avs, maybe to put a down payment on CSU football. Whatever you're into, got a great option there. First Bank makes managing your money feel like a win. No games, just solid tools to help you stay in control right from your phone. If you're ready to take your banking game to the next level, head to efirstbank.com/bonus. That's efirstbank.com/bonus. Certain restrictions and requirements to apply. Member FDIC. All right, I appreciate everybody that's rocking with us today. Make sure you keep it respectful, keep it polite in the Toyota chat, whether you're a Ram fan or not. I encourage anybody to stick around, give the show a shot, but we don't got to get nasty. We don't got to get, like we already have plenty of nastiness on Twitter. Like we don't need to bring that to the Toyota chat. This is supposed to be fun. It's the off season. We don't even play each other for the next 4 years. Like everybody can simmer down a little bit. That said, it is a great rivalry. Obviously, there's a lot of passion there. There's a lot of intensity. I get it. There's bad blood. We don't like you. You don't like us. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. But I was surprised that the New York Times, in their top 100 rivalries in college football, have the Rocky Mountain Showdown ranked as the 91st best rivalry in the country. The Border War got a little bit more respect at number 69. But the fact that neither ranked in the top 50, to me, that's highly, highly debatable. Like I said, I mean, I get that it's not a top 10, not a top 15 rivalry in college football nationally. I think from a uniqueness standpoint, the Border War especially is one of the truly special rivalries in college football. I just think there's so much that plays into that. I'll talk about it in a sec. But even the Showdown, like in the 21st century, you're telling me there's 90 rivalries in college football that are better. They had Michigan, Ohio State 1, fair. Auburn, Alabama 2, fair. Oklahoma, Texas, Army, Navy, USC, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Miami, Florida State, Ohio State, Penn State, Florida, Florida State, and Minnesota, Wisconsin as their top 10. All that to me, more or less fair. Semantics, you want to get into it. Alabama, LSU at 13. I feel like that's a top 10 rivalry. Michigan, Michigan State, they have at 16. Like, I get it. You could go back and forth. Every state's got some form of in-state rivalry. They're all intriguing in their own right. But I just felt like a lot of these matchups west of the Mississippi, especially, were really overlooked. And I'm not trying to be that guy that's like, oh, New York Times, East Coast snobs, elitist, or anything like that. I think that's probably oversimplifying it. But I do think there's probably an element of them going with what they know from a geographic standpoint. I get that. Like, they have Montana State at 60. That's absurd, man. That's a top 20 rivalry in college football. It just has to be. Go to a game in Bozeman or Missoula and tell me that's not one of the most epic rivalries you've been a part of. No, it's not 110,000 people like a big SEC game or a big, Big Ten matchup. But some of the rivalries that they included in the top 75 are just, to me, like borderline not even rivalries. Penn State, Iowa, really? Played less than 30 times, only a matchup from when, Penn State moved to the Big Ten. They've got that at 67. That's a top 70 rivalry in college football. I don't know. Michigan State, Penn State at 65. Maybe, I guess, but by that logic, is every single conference matchup in the Big Ten and SEC a big time rival? Because if you're Penn State, who's a more significant rivalry to you than Michigan State? Michigan, Ohio State, probably Notre Dame. Pitt matters more to you. Like, it's at best its fifth most significant rival, and you're saying that should go ahead of some of these other these other matchups, like the Rocky Mountain Showdown, like the Border War. I don't know, man. LSU Arkansas at 48. LSU Arkansas is a top 50 rivalry in college football. Again, I would come back to, if you were ranking rivals for these schools, how significant is this game? Is it a game that these fans live and breathe by? If you lose it, does it potentially ruin your season? And to me, a lot of the games that they put in the top 75 don't apply to that. And I think it's a stretch just because a lot of people watch them, just because it's a game that has implications in conference championships and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's a dud of a game. It just means it's not a rival. And to me, like, the thing that makes college football rivals so much more unique than the professional ranks is that, at least in American sports, it's closer to the dynamic they have overseas with soccer, to where the rivalry is deeper than just the sport being played on the field. It's about the community you live in. It plays out in your everyday life. You're around each other, and that's why it's so important to you. If you're a CSU fan, you have to deal with the trolling from, the Dion cult constantly. You see people from Laramie in your everyday life. On the street that I live on, there are 3 different cars with Wyoming Cowboys bumper stickers. They're all very nice people. Get along with them. I've got good neighbors for the most part. One crazy lady, but it is what it is. But like, it matters to me so much that every time I see that sticker, I snicker a little bit and I think about, God, I want that bronze boot so bad. God, I want to, give a little smirk at the neighbor when I'm walking the dog down the street and he's got his Cowboys hat on and I've got my CSU Rams gear on. And I know in that moment, I know that, my side won. It means so much more, especially the border war. It's not just about a football game. It's really about like a representation of two different ways of lives. Like to me, it's closer to like a great Texas high school football rivalry or something like that, just because there's so much day-to-day interaction, between the fan bases. And then that's what makes it great. And even the Rocky Mountain Showdown, which is complicated because I think depending on who you ask, CSU CU is a more important, more significant rival to a lot of Ram fans than Wyoming is at this point. To me, the history is just so much more significant with Wyoming. I'm a sucker for all of that, for the pageantry and for the tradition of college football. If you've listened to the show for a long time, you know that. I'm a sucker for all of that stuff, and I admit it. Obviously, from a parody standpoint, the Showdown has not been quite as consistently competitive as the border war has for the most part over the years. You look at the results, CU wins 3 times as often as CSU does. I get it. I know the history. You don't have to throw it back in my face. I'm well aware. I've been doing this my whole freaking life. But it's interesting to me that the disparity in resources is never brought up in that conversation. Also, a lot of wins from pre 1950 that really get flexed. All right, it is what it is. CSU obviously has not been the more successful side in that matchup, but I just get annoyed by the commentary from the folks that try and imply that because CU does win, essentially 3 times out of 4 historically, that it's a game that's not worth playing, especially if we're going on modern times. Again, this has been a rough stretch for CSU over the last decade, last 5 straight or whatever it is. But the game is so much more competitive in the modern era than any Buffs fans will ever want to admit. Sonny won 3 of 4 between 99 and 2002. And really, that's the time period that made me fall in love with college football. So, maybe I look at this through an unrealistic lens. But even after that, man, like you lose an incredible shootout in 03 between Joel Klatt and BVP. I think it was 42-35. It was like the Lightning game. It was on ESPN. Both offenses go crazy. Really fun game after, the head spike year in 02, which obviously CSU won. But you win 3 of 4 between 99 and 02. You lose 03 in a shootout. You lose by a touchdown. In 04, you lose at the goal line because there's confusion. Marcus Houston gets tackled short of the 1. Instead of scoring the game-winning touchdown, winning on a walk-off touchdown on the road, you lose a heartbreaker in 05. Mason Crosby kicks a 50-something yarder to win. I mean, that's 3 coin flip games that unfortunately you come out on the wrong side out of. But how different is the perception of this matchup if those games go CSU's way, which they very easily could have, even if 2 of 3 go CSU's way. I mean, you look at 2015, CSU loses in overtime by 3 in a game they missed 3 field goals, had multiple field goals blocked. That's brutal. In 2017, the questionable OPI, you lose that game by 14, but that was a really tight game. You lose a really frustrating game in Boulder in 2023. I mean, that's 7 coin flip games I just named off the top of my head that very, very easily could have gone the other way. Now, have there been, a couple that have gone your way that could have and made it even worse? Yes. Playing devil's advocate, they won a weird game in 06, 2009 or whatever it was. They won a couple of fluky ones when both teams were just terrible in terms of how much I put stock into the results for either side. I feel like really 28 through 2011 is just kind of a shameful dead period that I think both sides would like to forget, just year after year of each side going 3-9, 4-8 at best, and just being absolutely miserable. But it's a rivalry, and in every sense of the word. You look at the viewership. I mean, 3.2 million people watched that game last year. It was over 9 million in 2024. It didn't have quite as much drama or buildup this past year as they did the year before to kind of build into all of that. But I don't think you average 6 million viewers for a matchup over a 2-year period if there are 90 better rivalries in college football than that. And just feel like the Showdown should at worst be like a top 80, top 75 rivalry in college football. You want to put it behind some of those big time SEC matchups. I get it. I'd put Montana State, North Dakota State, some of those really niche matchups. I'll even give those the nod over the Rocky Mountain Showdown, but it's a top 75 rivalry. And I think that the Border War is a top 25 rivalry in college football. at worst top 40. At worst top 40. When you look at the history between these two schools, I I just I don't see how you can't put it in that conversation. 115 all-time meetings. They played consecutively since 1946. They've got one of the coolest and most unique trophies in all of sports in the bronze boot. I mean, the history behind it, the story, it's not just some random, trophy. Like the thing about the Centennial Cup, as great as the rivalry between CSU and CU is, the traveling trophy is an atrocity. It's a half-assed disaster, kind of like the Golden Spike is on the volleyball side. Just get rid of it, or get something that is more unique, and it actually has meaning between the two teams. The bronze boot is so cool. 65 miles of separation between the two schools. We're invested in each other's lives, man. That's a rivalry that plays out 365 days a year. It's not just about the border war and the bronze boot. It's a big part of it. And winning and losing, you feel the ramifications of that for the entire year. But just some of these matchups that they have deemed a bigger deal, or more significant than the border war, especially, it gets me irked a little bit. I just feel like you got to put some respect on these rivalries west of the Mississippi, and it's not just USC, UCLA, and Oregon, Washington, and there's some great ones, but there's some pretty cool ones in Middle America too that I just think get overlooked by the big time coast-based outlets. We'll just phrase it that way. All right, we got to take one last break, shout out our final partners, and then we're going to talk about some rivals in the Pac-12 era. Who are the biggest in-conference rivals going to be? Could this matchup between CSU and Utah State, which has been a lot of fun, going back to 2011 or so, could that be something? I'll give my thoughts on all of it. Let's shout out our partners, though. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. Life is going to test you. Had a lot of speed bumps over the last calendar year or so. I can tell you from experience, though, every time I have lost my chill, lost my cool, flipped out, something like that, it's done nothing but make the situation worse. Find little ways to help you deal with those curveballs that are inevitably going to come your way. Maybe it's getting some exercise. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's getting chores done. I do think there's something about accomplishing a task that I just think feels good. Like, I think it's an innate human trait. But whatever you got to do, put yourself in that right mindset, get the vibes right. And then when you're chilling, when you're kicked back, when you got the game on, when you got the dog next to your lap, maybe you got a bag of chips open, crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Finally, trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, they built durable legends destined for greatness, perfect for Colorado. Whether you're going to be in the mountains and you're constantly on I-70 and having to deal with that, whether you're somebody who's just driving around in town and you need something convenient and affordable and it's going to last for you, Toyota's got options for you. And what's really cool is they've got a lot of vehicles that actually work perfectly for both. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, hauling the weight of the world, they've got a truck that's right for you. Check out the Tacoma, the Land Cruiser's back. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, though. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. Before we get out of here, I felt like it would be kind of a fun way to end the show by talking about the rivals, or who will be the biggest rivals in the Pac-12 era. I do think it's potentially a spot where the conference is going to be lacking a little bit. But I also think there's an opportunity here to build on some matchups that have already been kind of fun. I don't want to miss this, so I'm going to get to this now. Brett in the Toyota chat says, do you know if Altitude will pick up games that won't be on networks like last year? I think so. I can't say definitively because I don't work for altitude, obviously, but I would be really surprised if they don't pick up the UNC game like last year, and probably a league game or two as well, like that New Mexico matchup or something like that. I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't. I guess maybe not New Mexico just because it's in Albuquerque, but the Hawaii game, I can't remember. There's like one other one that's still potentially in flux at the moment, but I do expect that. I can't say definitively, but I think it'll happen. CD6 says, I think a decade plus of two bad teams playing in front of a half full mile high killed a lot of the prestige of the RMS. I think that's really fair. I mean, obviously, the Rocky Mountain Showdown for a good 15 years was not even remotely as electric as, what we experienced in the glory days, the heydays of, like the late 90s, early 2000s, and even like the last couple of years. The intensity of that match, it's ramped up. It's honestly gotten to a point where it's probably become a little bit overboard and a little absurd, but that's why these things matter, man. And it's why I'd push back on anybody that tried to diminish the values of these rivals. And kind of coming back to what I said about how, teams like Penn State and Alabama and some of these SEC and Big Ten teams, they've got 16 different matchups listed on this list. CD Stick says, if a team believes it has 4+ rivals, I question if they have any rivals. And that's what I keep coming back to, man. A rivalry game, those are the types of games that define your season. Those are the ones you lose sleep over when you blow it and you look back on for years and years when they go your way. And even like CSU Air Force, to an extent, I don't really think qualifies as that. Yes, it's an in-state rival. It's a matchup that's got a lot of history. You're in the same league. It matters. I don't lose sleep if CSU doesn't win the Air Force game. I mean, this year could be a little bit different because the last game of the regular season could be some big time implications, at stake there. But I don't know. Like it's got to be the type of game that if you lose it, it's gonna rub the fan base wrong for weeks, for months, for years. I still think about that play in 2004 and almost 20 years later in Boulder in 2023, being on the sidelines with BVP as CSU collapsed and blew such a golden opportunity to win that game after being firmly in control and being the better team for 55 minutes of action. It sticks with you. And in some of those games that they had in that list, that's just not applicable. There's going to be a lot of rivalries that the Pac-12 inherits that are intriguing, that Pac-12 members are a part of. You get the Apple Cup, you get the Civil War. I don't think they call it that anymore, between Oregon and Oregon State. You get the Battle of the Brothers, between Utah and Utah State. The Border War and the Showdown you obviously inherit, but those are all non-conference matchups. I am very interested to see from within the league who are the biggest rivals going to be. Really, the only true in-conference rival that you're inheriting in this modern Pac-12, at least in terms of established tradition, has a traveling trophy, is Fresno and Boise. It has been a really fun matchup. It goes back to the WAC, but especially in the Mountain West era, both those WAC teams came in and had a lot of success. They played each other multiple times for the Mountain West Championship. They play for, what is it, like the Milk Jug or whatever? It's kind of a unique one, which I'm all about that kind of stuff. But you look at the history, they played less than 30 times. It's not one that goes back to the late 1800s like CSU Wyoming, or it's not Alabama LSU or something like that. But it is a fun one. I'm excited to see how that pans out. Two good football programs. You need those types of games, especially because we actually are going to be losing a lot of in-conference rivals with this move. You don't bring the battle for the Fremont Cannon over. You lose that Nevada UNLV rival. Technically, Wyoming and Hawaii have a traveling trophy. I've always been very weirded out by that one, but it does exist. So we'll count it. We'll count it on the list. That's one that you're losing. Obviously, you're losing CSU Air Force. Utah State and New Mexico have had a thing going. That's more of a hoops rivalry. Same thing with New Mexico, San Diego State. But you lose all of those, with the two leagues going their separate ways. I think we need more rivalries within the league. And I think now is the perfect time for both CSU and Utah State to embrace what has already been a fun matchup, which has already produced some crazy results. Even, you think back to 2013, CSU, they lost a really tough game to a great Utah State defense. They had like Zach Vigil, whatever his name was. That was a tight game. There's some weird stuff with Capri in that matchup. They lose like 13-0. But it's a game that, going back to 2011, when CSU and Utah State started playing annually again, they actually played for 2 years while Utah State was still in the WAC before they inevitably joined the Mountain West. It's been a really, really competitive matchup. It's been back and forth. There have been crazy results. Obviously, you have the weird kick game with Adazio. That's a disaster. You have the fail Mary, Colin Hill to Preston Williams. There've been a lot of really weird ones. Even like homecoming a couple years ago in 2022 was a tight game where it felt like it kind of got away from CSU. It's been really back and forth. Last year, the Rams make the dramatic comeback and are able to steal one. I think that now is when they should really embrace it. I feel like this is a matchup that's kind of formed some bad blood organically, which is always the desired outcome. I talked before about how CU and Utah was kind of shoehorned into a rivalry that never really came to fruition. It just wasn't there. You've got a history here. I mean, they played 80 times already, which is significant. Again, Boise and Fresno have a traveling trophy. They haven't even played 30 times. You played 80 times over the years. And in those 80 games, CSU is 40, 38, and 2. I mean, that's about as close as it gets with a matchup that has as much history as this one does. CSU is 19, 17, and 1 in FOCO. They're 21, 21, and 1 in Logan. So it's been back and forth no matter where the game is. It's not, a CSU Boise situation where it's like so lopsided when you're in Boise. It's been good games no matter where it's been played. You're roughly, what is it, like 450 miles from each other or whatever. I mean, it's a drivable matchup. 7 of the 13 times you played since 2011 have been one-score games. Only once has the outcome been greater than 2 touchdowns, greater than 15 points, I should say, because touchdown and a 2-point conversion. I mean, it's been there. The parity's been there. The matchups have been fun. You're going into the league, and it's fortunate. It's honestly kind of a fortunate thing for both of these schools because, like, you don't get to play CU every year anymore if you're CSU. I do think that CSU and Wyoming will always play each other. It wouldn't benefit either side to get rid of that game. Even if Wyoming was an FCS team, I would say they should play Wyoming every single year. There's just too much history. It matters too much to the communities. But, the CSU, CU, it's not a yearly thing anymore. Utah and BYU, they both big time. Utah State as well, and do that bullshit where, we're going to go schedule higher profile matchups and not give the people the games that they really want. So let's generate something amongst ourselves. Let's lean into this identity. It's also really competitive in basketball as well. It's 15-15 over the last 30 games between CSU and Utah State. I don't think you can really ask for much more. Like, everything's in place. You just need a trophy to kind of spark it and get it going here. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I think especially because we're losing CSU Air Force, in the future. Now is the time to lean into it, to get a little bit of creative and to add another traveling trophy to the mix. Cause I think CSU could use it. I think Utah State could use it. And frankly, I think the Pac-12 could use it, establish another premier matchup, one that, people look forward to every year. Oh, who's going to win the whatever? Give me your suggestions, in the comments, or tweet it at me, whatever. If you can come up with a fun name for CSU Utah State, maybe we can coin it. Maybe we can be the people that get the ball rolling here. I'm certainly going to bug John Weber about it at some point this summer. Just, try and get in his ear a little bit. Hey, what do you think about this? But I'm excited, man. I'm excited for the Pac-12 era. I've already talked a lot about why the semantics of branding and whether it's a Power 4 conference or not, to me, who cares, as long as you're definitively the 5th best league, as long as you have access to the playoff, as long as it's competitive, fun games, people are going to be into it. And I just want this whole thing to come to an end, honestly, in terms of the mediation. And now you throw the GCU thing into the mix. Like, I'm a little over all of that and the speculation and what might be and what might not be. It'd be nice to have some concrete answers. But I think the future is very bright. I think there's an exciting time to establish some new traditions here if you're CSU, and make what's already an exciting move and what should be really fun that much more interesting, and just adds another little fun layer into the whole process. We'll talk about it more tomorrow, but if you missed it, Isaiah Stevens signed a 2-way deal with the Kings, reunited with Nate Clifford. That's super cool. We'll talk about the NCAA 26 ratings tomorrow, talk about who is maybe ranked a little too low, talk about why I think the defense is going to make a big jump whenever they do a ratings evaluation there and reevaluate things. The last thing I just wanted to say, though, is I just ask people to be cool, both in the Toyota chat and online. There have been a lot of nasty comments at the DNVR Rams account with some posts that had BFN tagged in it. Being critical is fair, totally fair game. If you're saying some really backhanded, snarky stuff with a nameless, faceless account, I'm just going to block you. And I don't want to do it because I'm sure some of those accounts really support the work, but I'm not going to run an account that just directly leads to student athletes getting bullied and tagged and horrific things said to them from people who don't even have enough courage to put their name or their face behind their accounts. It's weak shit, and I won't stand for it. Won't allow it again. Being critical, that's fair game. But when you're making these petty little passive aggressive comments, oh, this guy sucks, can't wait till he leaves, that doesn't sit right with me. And honestly, those are the same accounts that throw hissy fits when people leave in the portal. Loyalty is a two-way street, guys. Like, some of these accounts that are throwing shade, they're talking shit about BFN. If he has a great season, they're going to be right back in his corner and pissed if he ends up going to the portal next year, going to the NFL. They're going to be like, oh, I thought you were loyal to CSU. Well, were you loyal to your guys? Being loyal doesn't mean that somebody you root for is above criticism, that you can't point out potential flaws where they need to improve. None of that. All of that's fair game. But some of the stuff that happens online these days, I just think it's lame. And I think if you're going to be critical, that's one thing. But if you're just going to be a bully, we don't need you in the community, and I don't need that type of engagement in my life. And I certainly know that the student athletes don't need that negativity in their world, because they get plenty of it already. It doesn't make you tough. It doesn't make you cool. It just makes you a loser. So that's where I'm at with all of that. Again, like, not trying to be a downer at the end of the show, but it's something I've been thinking about. I've seen it amplified over the last year, and I get it. There have been some tough moments, but be cool, man. Be cool as a fan base. These guys are young. This isn't Patrick Mahomes out there. This isn't the NFL. It's changing. It's getting more professional by the year. But, they're still 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. And I just think it's real easy to pop off and run your mouth when you're hiding behind a nameless, faceless account. So thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.